let's talk about how being non-judgmental is not a virtue and why you should be extremely judgmental, especially in your relationships. I know that might sound crazy, like, what are you talking about? Aren't you supposed to be non-judgmental? Isn't being judgmental a bad thing? We're taught not to judge people, that we need to be more considerate, more sensitive, more tolerant. I'm here to tell you, that's all bullshit. The people who believe that we should not judge people, that being non-judgmental is somehow virtuous, these are the same people who do terrible things and don't want to be held accountable for their actions. Before we go any further, when I say we need to be more judgmental, I am not talking about you actually treating them poorly because you feel like you're superior to them in some way. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having good judgment and calling out bad behavior. Now, if you really think about it, we all judge all the time. You might not want to admit it, but you judge all the time. The moment you wake up, you judge how you're feeling. You judge how your coffee tastes in the morning. You judge your coworkers when you're at work. You judge how the people are driving when you're coming back home. You judge your food, your TV shows, your clothes, your partner. You judge everything every single day. So judging is not a problem. It's a matter of what you do with that judgment. Imagine how ridiculous it would be to raise children with this idea of being non-judgmental. When the child says, I don't want to eat vegetables, I just want to eat candy. And you say, okay, well, I don't want to judge their eating preferences. The child doesn't do their homework and plays video games all the time. And you go, oh, I don't want to judge their choices. Your child becomes a bully in school and starts hitting other children. And you go, well, I don't want to judge how they express their anger. Do you see how stupid it is to have this mentality of being non-judgmental? Or if you talk to somebody who you know has done horrible things, and you talk to them as if there's nothing wrong, like they're just a friend, well, what is your justification? Are you gonna be like, oh, I don't like to be judgmental? You're not being virtuous. You're being a coward because you're too afraid to speak up. As a society, we're so caught up in this idea that we need to be more compassionate, more tolerant, more sensitive, to the point where we just let people get away with horrible behavior. In addition to that, the existence of cancel culture is making everybody so afraid to speak up, to be honest about what they think, for the fear of being labeled or judged. Look at where we are. There's a huge increase in mental illness, mass shootings, protests, hatred on both sides of the political parties, biological men entering into women's bathroom, mutilating children without the parents' consent. This is where we are. When you stop judging negative behavior, you see more of them because people can just get away with it. It is entirely predictable. People are just as moral as the consequences for being immoral. Being non-judgmental is not a virtue. We need to socially judge people so that we can disencourage immoral behavior. However, and this is very important, if you want to be judgmental, you cannot be a hypocrite. Let me say that again. If you want to be judgmental, you cannot be a hypocrite. As a healthy, functioning adult, your role should be to lead by examples, to demonstrate what behaviors are appropriate and condemn what is inappropriate. When you act this way, you inspire other people to be better versions of themselves, not just in relationships, but in all areas of life. And this is not a bad thing. It's not a sacrifice that you're making. This is the reward that you should actively seek. When you're casting judgment to other people, knowing that your words match your actions, that you don't just talk the talk, but you actually walk the walk. When you say to someone, you shouldn't have done that, that is lazy and selfish. When everybody around you knows that if you were in the same situation, you would have done the right thing, then your words mean something. That is a powerful feeling. That's the reward that comes from being genuinely a positive person. But if you're lazy and selfish yourself, then you can't go around judging people, because then you'll be a hypocrite. You are a terrible example and your words don't mean anything. Nobody is going to respect your judgment. Now, in romantic relationships, you have to be extremely judgmental, as you set the minimum standards and expect your partner to meet those standards. It only makes sense if you yourself also meet those standards. By living up to those standards, it gives you the authority and the confidence necessary to demand the same from your partner. However, you cannot expect your partner to live up to those standards that you yourself have failed to meet. Because if you hold them to a standard that you yourself completely ignore, then you're a hypocrite, and this is a recipe for breakup. Right now, we're witnessing the highest number of single people than ever before. About 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the other 50% don't necessarily have healthy relationships either. It feels like everywhere you go, you hear people complaining about relationships. And I think part of this is because we don't call out toxic behavior. Instead, we indulge in them. When your partner does something terrible to you, if they lose their temper and start yelling at you, don't yell at them back. If they hit you, don't hit them back. If they cheat on you, do not go out and have an affair. If you do, you lose the moral high ground. You can no longer point the finger and say, you shouldn't have done that, because then you'd be a hypocrite. Do you understand what I'm saying? Your ability to judge somebody is massively enhanced if your record is clean. But if you give up the moral high ground, you sink to that level and start to engage in the same toxic behavior, then you are just as bad as they are. Do not do that. You want to be able to judge with a clean conscience, knowing that you have standards of behavior and they have failed to meet those standards. So again, you need to forget all of the cultural indoctrination that you need to be non-judgmental. That's all bullshit. Having good judgment is a way of declaring your self-esteem. It's you telling everybody what standards you live by and what standards you expect from the people that you associate with. Speaking of self-esteem, did you know that every time you accept insult or disrespect, automatically it's going to have the effect of lowering your self-esteem? This is a mechanism that many abusers use to reduce your self-esteem so that they can treat you worse and worse over time. If you want to learn more about that, check out this video here. Until next time, stay curious.